Hey everybody! So today I come to you with the Game of Thrones tarot deck. Yay! I got it for my birthday from my beautiful colleagues at my workplace, and I will talk about what I expected before I got the tarot, what I love and appreciate about it, what I don't like about it so much, or what I would change. And then I will show you some of my favorite cards and tell you who I think the deck is perfect for and who probably shouldn't buy it. And you will also learn what is my most hated card in the whole deck. Just a little disclaimer, this video will contain spoilers for Game of Thrones because I will talk about the storylines behind the cards. This video is not sponsored, I got it as a gift. And it will not be a card by card go through. I have a card by card of this deck, which I will put a link to up here, but this will just show my favorite cards in the end of the video. So let's jump right into what I expected before I got this deck. Mostly I just saw major arcana cards. I saw that Arya was death, that Daenerys was the Empress, that Jon Snow was the Emperor. And I thought to myself, these are all really obvious choices, and I didn't really like that about it. I didn't think the deck would have a lot of depth, but in the end, I think one of the cards that I was confused by or didn't like in the beginning, which is Death, is actually a very good example of what this deck does and what it can do for you. So let's look at the Death card as an example. At first I thought, come on, Arya kills people, that's why you make her the Death card. Okay, that's too obvious, you know. But as I got into the deck more and thought about it more, I realized that Arya is the most appropriate person for the Death card, because in tarot, the Death card talks about losing your ego, letting go of your ego and figuring out what you truly want inside. And of course, Arya's path with the Faceless Men is all about losing her old self, about losing her ego and going on this journey to basically assume a new self, a very moldable self, where she can turn herself into whoever she wants to be. In the end, that journey fails in a sense, because all it does is it serves to show her that after all, her ego is way too important to her. She can't let go of the things she wants as Arya Stark. She can't let go of wanting to take revenge and of the pain of the loss of her family. And this death of the ego, followed by a journey of realization what her deepest needs are, is very in tune with the Death card. So I ended up loving this card a lot, actually, even though at first glance I thought, that's not so great, you know. And this is actually true for a lot of the cards. What I love about this deck is that it adds so much depth to the tarot cards because they have the storylines of the Game of Thrones characters embedded in them, basically. For anyone who doesn't know a lot about tarot, it makes it an easy entryway, because if you see a card, you already have the association of what the story is about and what the character is about. So you have a way easier time understanding the card. The art is also very, very great. I love the muted colors. I'm just going to show a few of the cards as I speak here. They have muted colors. They have very detailed art in a lot of ways, and they are very atmospheric. What I also need to praise is definitely the little guidebook that comes with it. It has a few spreads suggested about the Red Keep, about the 7 gods. And my favorite spread so far is the Tyrion Lannister spread called I Drink and I Know Things, because it feels like it's a great party spread, because it's kind of like a conversation. You know, when you have nothing to say at a party, or when you're with someone and you don't quite know what to talk about, and then you end up Googling something like 10 questions to respond to start a conversation or something, like what's your favorite music and stuff like that. This is what that spread is on a very deep level, because it not only talks about what you think of yourself and what you think your strengths are, but it also has like fun aspects to it that just get you talking and get a conversation onto a deeper level. So I really love that spread. So I think, to me, in a way, it is as if you're learning to row backwards, because instead of starting by looking at the cards and learning the meanings without any stories attached to it, you start with the story. You already know the story of Game of Thrones if you're a fan, and then connecting it to the archetypes and the meanings of the cards is such a deep learning experience, I feel like, especially for people who don't know anything about tarot. Now, let me talk real quick about some things I don't like about the deck. I've done a little character count. How many cards have a certain character? Daenerys and Jon are both represented on 5 cards, 5 different cards, which I think is a little overkill, because they basically make up 10 of the 78 cards. So an eighth of the deck is Jon and Daenerys. And it kind of muddies the meaning of the cards a little bit, because, for example, Daenerys is the Chariot, the Empress, and the Queen of Wands. It just kind of makes it feel like it blends together the meanings of the cards a little bit too much, in my opinion. And they could have included different characters that also incorporate these archetypes and the personalities that are behind the meanings of the cards. But in general, I feel like they did a good job. The deck has more than 20 different characters in it, and I can appreciate that, definitely. So it's not like they didn't go for many different characters. Nevertheless, there's some characters that I'm missing in the deck and that I would have liked to see. For example, Catelyn Stark as basically the archetype of the lioness mother, kind of close to Cersei, but on a more Queen of Cups level. I would have loved to see Catelyn as the Queen of Cups, but that's Sansa, and that's also not entirely inappropriate, so I'm okay with that. Robb is actually the only one of the Stark children who is not featured in the deck at all. And yeah, I get why he's dead, like so many people, but I don't know. I feel like Robb's role was overshadowed by Jon's role in the end anyways, so I get that they didn't put Robb in. Marjorie Tyrell as the plotting seductress also wasn't in the deck at all. Theon Greyjoy, who has such a strong storyline where he completely loses his self, like it's a complete loss of ego, and he slowly has to rebuild it and reclaim and redefine what his actual personality is and who he wants to be. And I think that would have been a powerful storyline to include, but he's not in it. Then Shay isn't in it. Yeah. I also would have liked to have seen Jorah Mormont as the perfect loyal knight who kind of resurrected his honor by serving a new queen. Missandei isn't in it. I would have loved to see her as like basically a communications director in a way. She would have been a great page, I think. Maybe the Page of Cups or something, which is Bran actually. But I think Missandei would have been great in the deck as well, especially because the deck doesn't have a lot of diversity. So yeah, I would have really liked to see her in it. I also think that some of the houses have a little too much of their energy in the deck. And this will lead to my most hated card in the deck, which is the Hanged Man. The Hanged Man traditionally in tarot is about gaining a new perspective, even gaining enlightenment through it. Like, compare this card with, for example, a more traditional depiction of the Hanged Man, where he hangs from a tree, but you can see around his head that he is gaining some enlightenment and new ideas from it. Whereas this is the Flayed Man, in case you don't remember. He is basically the sigil of the Bolton family, who tortures people in order to break them and enslave them, essentially. And having this as the representation of the Hanged Man just doesn't really work for me. And I get that it kind of works because Theon gains a new perspective by being tortured, definitely, but it's not a good one. And the Hanged Man, while he is about waiting and figuring something out, it usually has a positive connotation. Yeah, so I can't quite get on board with that. Ramsay Bolton is also the devil. And, I mean, he is the devil card, but he's also the fucking devil because everybody hates him. So I guess it's appropriate to make him the devil card. Anyway, enough about the bad stuff. I still think this is a great deck. I kind of ranted on about what I don't like. And even though I would have liked to have seen some of the Jon Snow or Daenerys cards depicted in a different way, there's still a huge amount of great cards and great meanings. And I want to show you now how the storylines tie into the meanings of the cards and how they make the cards more juicy, and how they make the readings more juicy that you can have with these cards. So let's start. This card is spot on. It's so perfect. When I saw this card, I was so excited. The Ten of Swords is traditionally about defeat, absolute and utter defeat, failure, but it also has a component of a new journey starting soon and a new energy entering your life maybe. And it's sort of in the same vein as the Death card. And what I love about it is that this is about Jon Snow being killed by his friends or his soldiers at the Night's Watch, basically. And as you know, this was an ultimate defeat for him, but he gets revived in the end. So this card has it all. It has the defeat, but also the rebirth aspect. So I really, really love this one. The Two of Swords is Arya. This is when she is blind. And she's holding two swords, which is a very traditional image for the Two of Swords. And she is in the midst of deciding what to do. And what I love is that in her right hand, she holds the sword that Jon Snow gave to her when she left Winterfell. The sword basically stands not only for her love for her family, but also for her lust for revenge and for everything she's lost that she held dear, for all the people that have been taken from her and that she now wants revenge for. And in the other hand, she holds the wooden sword that she trains to be a faceless woman with. So you kind of have this path of the ultimate egoistical desire of killing the people who have wronged her and her family. And then you have the more dissolving aspect of becoming a faceless woman and losing all of this ego. The Six of Cups, that's Jon and Sansa. They are sitting together for the first time in a long time. This is in season 7, I believe, where they finally meet again at Winterfell. And they sit down together and just talk. And what I love is that the Six of Cups is usually about childhood memories, about seeing the world like a child again, or using the lessons that you learned as a child in your adult life. And this reconnection between Sansa and Jon is a perfect example of how they kind of deal with their childhood issues with each other. Because Sansa, probably influenced by her mother, Catelyn, hated Jon. He wasn't part of the family for her, and she always felt superior to him, while Jon was kind of left out of the family. And after all this time and after everything they've been through, they are reconnecting in this scene. And I think that's so, so powerful, and it explains the card so well. Then we have the Three of Coins. Here, I don't know if you remember this scene. In my head, it was like a really short scene or a very short interlude. But it is where the Hound ends up kind of joining a spiritual, religious community and helping them build a village before all of them get killed brutally. But in the Three of Coins, traditionally you have a cathedral being built, and it's a representation of building something greater than the sum of the parts of your effort. So people coming together and building something that is bigger than themselves, that has a higher purpose than just being a house or something useful. And I think this representation is perfect, especially with the tragical background behind it, where in the end the Hound can't protect them, and his spiritual journey is kind of cut short by that. Then lastly, I have Temperance, which is Sam, who is studying right now, but we also know that he's a very active character. He fully represents the balance between preparing an informed decision, acquiring the knowledge that you need, and then taking very, very effective action, like when he healed Jorah Mormont, or when he learns about dragon glass, or when he helps Gilly, takes her beyond the wall and decides that he's going to protect her and her child. He is a very reflected person, but also a very effective person if he wants to be, and if he overcomes his fears. And I think that's a very powerful message for the Temperance card. As you saw, most of my favorite cards are Minor Arcana, and that is rare. The Minor Arcana has a lot of depth if you choose the right imagery. And I feel like this Game of Thrones deck shows spot-on images for a lot of the Minor Arcana cards. You have scenes, like whole worlds basically being opened that you can explore through the different cards, rather than just having one person on it that is supposed to embody a whole concept, you know. Now let's talk about who I think can benefit most from this deck, and who it is basically spot on and perfect form. If you are into tarot and into Game of Thrones, obviously this deck is for you. You are the 100% target audience of this deck, no doubt. But if you are only into Game of Thrones and don't know anything about tarot, I think this is a great way to learn your first steps and exploring the cards through storylines that you already know. If you don't like Game of Thrones, but you do like tarot, or you don't like Game of Thrones and you also don't like tarot, then obviously this deck isn't for you. I think if you're not a Game of Thrones fan, even if you're a tarot expert, you wouldn't really get anything out of this deck, because you don't know any of the background information, you don't know the storylines. So there's not a lot you can draw from this deck. So tell me, do you have the deck too? Are you as in love with it as I am? Did you have your doubts at first? Tell me about it in the comments. Let me know what you think. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you for watching.